Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. We are so excited for folks to be joining us this afternoon. Lots of folks from different communities from across the country. We're seeing some familiar names. I am Shoga Fox, one of the Senior Directors of District Support here at the Flamboyan Foundation, and I am delighted to be serving as your moderator for this conversation today. The next slide. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Flamboyan Foundation, we are an organization housed in both Puerto Rico and in Washington, D.C. And for more than a decade, we have been working with to ensure that all students, especially those who are furthest from opportunity, have high quality educational experiences so that they can have a fulfilling life and be as successful as they can. Next slide. So our work out of the DC office is really focused on family engagement and what we define as being real family engagement. So real family engagement is when families and educators have relationships with teachers that are built on trust, ongoing communication, and shared power, where schools are creating experiences where educators can challenge their own biases, promote racial equity, where academic partnerships between families and educators include student performance and socio-emotional development to support student performance. And finally, leadership in schools where school systems and communities can create the conditions for meaningful engagement. And we believe that when family engagement gets real, educators and families can become true allies in educational excellence, schools foster a sense of belonging for everyone, and students can succeed in school and beyond. So our work in DC around real family engagement is really in 4 different buckets. So first is our school partnerships. So this is really focused in on our local DC community, where we work really closely with our school partners to provide deep coaching, training, and resources so that family engagement is really embedded and sustained in school practices. The second bucket of our work is systems level capacity building. This is where we work collaboratively with school districts and community organizations to really catalyze real family engagement across the country. We do this both in our DC local area with our Family Engagement Partnership Program, as well as our national fellowship. Third, related to the first 2, is our teacher and leader training. One of the things that we hear consistently from our partners that they value so much is that our trainings are led by both educators and families who are in the communities who are practicing and who are family engagement champions in their communities. And last but not least, we have a ton of resources on our website. So we put out real family engagement resources. These things include things like toolkits, reflection guides, and all sorts of things that folks from across the country can use to continue to reflect on and improve their family engagement practices. Today, our work is really going to focus on highlighting the work of our partners in the systems level capacity building piece. So speaking of our partners, one of the core tenets of our work here at the Flamboyan Foundation is really deep listening to our communities that we're serving and learning from the communities. We are incredibly lucky and grateful to work with our 2 partners in West Virginia and South Dakota, who for the last several years have been doing some really deep listening in their communities. They've been listening to both families and educators share what they're experiencing in terms of family engagement. And so we're really excited to highlight the work from our 2 partners who are going to be sharing what they've heard, what they're learning, and really how that's informing how they're bringing real family engagement into their unique contexts and communities and for their work going forward. And for our session today, we want to make sure that this is not just a session where our participants are just listening, but we really do want to engage with you. So some of you have already started to drop in the chat, but would love for folks to share thoughts that they have that are coming up for them, comments as you're hearing from our panelists today. If you have a resource that you feel like is aligned to what we're talking about today, please feel free to drop them in the chat box. We would love to hear from all of you. Towards the end of the session, we're also going to be having a short amount of time for a Q&A. So if you have a question that you would like to ask our panelists, please make sure to drop it in the Q&A box. And as a former educator, I know that it's really important to have continued opportunities for engagement. So we'll be dropping in a couple of prompts throughout the course of today's session that we would love for you to respond to both in the chat, and we'll also have an opportunity to engage larger later in today's session. So without further ado, I am going to invite my West Virginia colleagues, Kayla Benson and Donna Atwood, to come on screen, and I will be passing the mic off to them.
All right, thank you. I think I'm off mute now. Welcome. Thank you, Shoko and the Flamboyan team for putting this webinar on. It's always impressed with how organized everything is. Kayla and I are glad to be here to talk about the West Virginia Rural Family Listening Tour we conducted this past year.
So before we jump into specifics of the Rural Voices Listening Tour, we wanted to provide you with a little bit of a background on the EdVenture Group and the work that we do. So the EdVenture Group is a West Virginia-based nonprofit organization that was founded by a high school math teacher from Preston County. She founded EdVenture 21 years ago with the goal and inspiration to reimagine what education could look like. So in the early 2000s, a major focus of the organization was to get computers into the classrooms and ensure that there was adequate training and support available to make that transition successful. And as things have evolved in the last 20 plus years, the focus of EdVenture has evolved and expanded too. We currently have a variety of programs, including student leadership, teacher training, strategic planning and doing, work with after school programs, literacy programming, and STEM and innovation in schools. And K-12 education remains at the heart of all of our programs and all of our efforts. So a little more about our team. Dr. LaDonna Taylor, that you can see on the left of your screen, the bottom left, is our president and founder. And she is that former high school math teacher from rural West Virginia that I mentioned, who had a true drive and passion to reimagine education and support educators, students, and families across West Virginia and beyond. And I'm in the middle. My name's Kayla Benson. I'm a program manager and family engagement specialist with the EdVenture Group. I was born and raised in West Virginia, and prior to my time with the EdVenture Group, I spent about 10 years working with a local child advocacy center and as the director of a CASA for Kids that served 2 of our counties in West Virginia.
And I am Donna Atwood. I am in the other corner there. I am also a program manager and a family engagement specialist with the EdVenture Group. I live in Putnam County in West Virginia, and I've taught as a classroom teacher and as a reading specialist in several different counties here. I also have 2 kids in school and a husband who is a PE teacher. So there is lots of education perspectives in this household every evening. I also teach for the literacy education program at Marshall University, and my current dissertation topic for my doctorate degree, hopefully soon will be finished, is on literacy focused family engagement. So if you ever want someone to talk about that for hours, contact me. I am your person for that. We have next slide. So next, we just wanted to go over, we've told you about the EdVenture Group that we work with. The EdVenture Group, actually with the West Virginia Department of Education, we got a 5-year grant funded by the U.S. Department of Education to be a statewide family engagement center. And through that, our focus has been on building stronger family engagement in 100 identified West Virginia schools. And in each of our 100 schools, we gathered interview data from caregivers and educators. We also have students fill out surveys each year. So through these conversations and gathered data, and I'm kind of a data person, so I just need to talk about it for a second, we found more caregivers wanted their voices heard. And we also, as a team, sat around and were asking ourselves, what more could we hear from the communities about their perspectives of family engagement and education in their area, because it doesn't, we have found that it doesn't always align with the perspective that we hear from our interviews from school educators. And so luckily Flamboyan had the same vision and partnered with us to develop the West Virginia Rural Family Voices Listening Tour. And that is a mouthful. I kind of think, Kayla, maybe when we're designing these projects, maybe we should think about what it's like to present the whole name out there.
Keep it a little shorter next time. Okay, next slide, please. So yes, we established with our wonderful partners at Flamboyan that we wanted to do these rural family voices listening tours in West Virginia, but how do you begin to select or narrow down a location for these conversations? As Donna said, we're working with 100 schools across the state, so that's a lot of opportunity to have these conversations. And how did we begin to narrow it? So our team really did a deep dive and considered a few key things. The first being geographic location. So the entire state of West Virginia has a lot of commonalities, but it was important for us to consider counties representative of different parts of the state. So Southern West Virginia looks very, very different than Morgantown, West Virginia, or the Panhandles that are rural, but in a different way as they're close to more metropolitan areas. Second, we really looked at our family engagement center counties and selected counties we had a lot of schools in. So for example, Fayette County alone has 5 West Virginia Family Engagement Center schools. And additionally, many of these counties are counties that we know have a lot of extra challenges and a lot of voices eager to be heard. Nicholas County, for example, was impacted by the major flooding that affected West Virginia in 2016, and they are still facing really serious challenges. A lot of their classrooms are still in portable trailers. So there's just a lot going on as a result of that flooding that has caused a lot to happen in that county. And like I said, there are just a lot of voices that really need and want to be heard. So considering all of these things, our team felt that this was a really strong representation of counties across the state. And we moved forward with the listening tour in 4 of these counties in December of 2021 and 4 counties in July of this year. Next slide, please. So once we decided on our counties, we really needed to consider our approach. We've seen consistently through school events and conversations with our schools and families that attendance and participation at events is a challenge. So we really considered that in our approach as we strategized. We thought about recruitment. We wanted to reach everyone who might be interested in participating. So we recruited in a variety of ways. We asked the schools to share this information, but we recognize that there are some families who are just not as likely to attend if they receive the information from the schools. So we did a lot of outreach through community agencies like family resource networks, local food banks, United Ways, and general community informational pages. We considered the setting and learned from our experiences. In December of last year, we hosted all of these tours in school facilities, so in gymnasiums, at Board of Ed offices, et cetera. And when planning for the July tours, we realized there would be benefits to hosting these listening sessions at a neutral community location. And in July in West Virginia, the weather was on our side, so most of them were located outdoors at community parks. And third, we considered appropriate incentives. We know that we need to provide incentives to get folks to the table to have these conversations. So we provided each caregiver in attendance with a $50 gift card, a $10 gas card, provided a meal, and provided childcare if they needed it. So within this, we tried to think about every little detail, like making sure we were providing a gift card to a gas station that was a local gas station with many locations in that county to just cover all of the bases. So once we had those things figured out, we needed to consider our approach of how to actually hold these listening tours. What happens once we have this great group of folks in front of us ready to share with us? So our team decided to use the appreciative inquiry 4D cycle approach to guide these sessions. And this works by building new opportunities for voices to be heard. It generates opportunities to dream and to share, and allows participants to choose how they would like to contribute in a very positive way. So this was a way for us to guide the conversations in a positive direction while keeping them very open and open to honest feedback and discussion. Next slide, please.
Yeah, and here we are back with the data. What did we hear? And so here are some of the barriers and challenges. And I kind of thought that Kayla and I could kind of take you through these barriers and challenges while watching the time here through a grandparent that we were actually able to interview. And seeing that photo, the slide before this of the park, that's where we met. We had this conversation with her, was at a park, and through this conversation, that number one, poverty. She was a grandparent raising her grandson, and they were living with multiple generations in a small house. She was not working. No one in the house was working. So poverty is a barrier and challenge that we heard. Number two, addiction. Again, through this grandparent, she was actually there because she had custody of her grandson, and she had custody of him because her son, who was living in the house, was struggling with addiction. And so that's another barrier or challenge that we had gotten feedback on. The third one there is mental health. She actually showed up. She her literacy level wasn't exactly very high, and I think somehow she got confused and thought she was coming there for parenting tips on how to parent her grandson. And so we were able to connect her with that afterwards. But that mental health, it really came down to she needs some mental health services for her grandson. And so 3 mental health services, which also those issues that he was dealing with mental health was because of number 4, that trauma. So trauma that students and different generations in these families have experienced is a barrier and challenge. One that we saw, geographic isolation. That one specifically, the grandparent that we were talking to, she didn't fully realize that school was back in session. She was still homeschooling during from the effects of school being out for COVID, and she hadn't really been linked back into how to get him back. And so that geographic isolation of being still isolated in her house, not really knowing what's going outside the county, outside the state, is definitely a barrier and challenge also. Food security. Through the same conversation, she talked about the concern because all the generations in her house expected her to always have food on the table, and that being a concern, and meeting that number 7, those basic needs for her family. And so even though that was just one conversation that touched all 7 of those main barriers and challenges that we found that all over in many of the conversations that we had. And next slide.
So as I mentioned earlier, we really wanted to do everything we could to make sure each caregiver's voice was heard. When caregivers arrived at the event, we greeted them, directed them to the food, and gave each of them a pen and a blank note card like the one you see on the screen. And we asked them to really spend some time reflecting on the question of what they wish their students' school knew. We made sure to be available to write for participants if they weren't able to read or write, as Donna just mentioned. And as you can see, each caregiver took it in a different direction. And I know the handwritten ones are hard to see on the screen here, but I thought there was a lot of power in seeing their actual handwriting there. But the top one caregiver shared from the perspective of a child and said, "I wish my students' school knew that sometimes I come to school afraid of what is happening at home, that I'm hungry for more than just food. I need to feel secure and loved." And this one really stood out to us, and to be honest, stopped us in our tracks. It really reminded our team and these schools that we're working with of the reality and the perspective of so many students in our state and across the nation. Other caregivers shared reminders of their commitment to the children's education and how important communication is. One caregiver shared that they wish the school knew that they wanted to be on the same team and be their friend in this process as they both work to support their student. Next slide, please. Here's just another quote of some feedback that we got about how much these caregivers appreciated having the time and the space to have these conversations. Next slide.
And as Kayla said, I think it's very important that we were able to give them time for something paper and pencil. And that's what's great about these listening tours also is it's not, it's in person. A lot of our population struggles with access to internet. And so, and we also had people there to record their answers if they also needed that. Some of our key findings that we found was, the first one is that in a school setting, there was a lack of family comfort in school setting. And most of the time that often occurs because of their past experiences themselves with school. Another key finding was communication. There was some frustration with inconsistencies in communication, whether schools were using several different platforms and they didn't know where to go for what, and or if some teachers were using one platform a lot, like daily, and then some they barely heard maybe like once a month from them in that platform. And they also found a need for increased communication. They still wanted more than what they were getting. We also, another key finding was stigma. These challenges that we talked about of poverty and addiction, they create these negative stigmas for family. And so one thing is, to provide more school support to address these stigmas that are occurring. And with this family voice, these families in rural West Virginia want to feel heard, and they want to see their words. They want to see that their words have inspired positive change and towards a better future. And to do that, provide more opportunities. The Rural Family Voices listening tour was great for it, and that's one thing. But for schools to find more consistent ways for parents to give their voice, for community to give their voice, and to be heard. And then also when that occurs, gratitude. Families express sincere gratitude for the opportunity for their voice to be heard, valued, and shared with schools and districts. And that leads to our future impact. How has this impacted us in the future?
Next slide, please. So yes, how does this impact our current and our future work? The knowledge that we've gained has already started to inform the work and efforts of our family engagement schools. The schools from these 8 counties really took this information to heart and have started to incorporate changes specifically in enhancing communication efforts in this current school year, which we are seeing directly translate into equitable opportunities for all families. This information has and will continue to empower family advocates within schools and communities. These conversations helped us see firsthand that families want, need, and deserve a seat and a voice at the table. And through this, we are partnering with Flamboyan and our Family Engagement Center to start a Family Leaders Investing in Family Engagement program across our state to increase caregiver confidence in being a leader and having a seat at that table. Resource connection for basic and other needs. We were able to connect families who express specific needs. For example, Donna shared a little about the grandmother that she talked about in her information, which it enabled us to gain insight about what supports are available and share those to the grandmother. And I'm sorry, my watch just started talking to me. That threw me off a little bit. I apologize, but it was a way for us to make sure that we heard that grandmother's need and that we could collect some information and in turn share that information back with the grandmother to help her understanding of available resources, but also to help her form a partnership and a bond with her grandchild's school to move things forward. And additionally, through these conversations, we consistently heard about the need for increased mental health support and general awareness around mental health challenges in these communities across the state. So we're currently working on a project that helps us address these needs and to create customized content for communities across West Virginia to help break generational cycles of abuse, neglect, and addiction, and to better support families, schools, and communities in everything related to mental health. Next slide, please. So again, thank you all so much for being here today and for taking the time to listen. And thank you to the Flamboyan team for this opportunity. Donna and I would love to connect with you and chat more about all of these things. So please feel free to reach out to Donna or I anytime with questions or for more information.
Thank you. Kayla, I'm sure you're going to be hiding your watch next time you present.
I am. I will be taking my watch off. I apologize, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, Kayla and Donna, so much for sharing. I would love for folks, I saw a lot of things happening in the chat, people sharing where they're from, but I would love for folks to drop in the chat what is resonating with you. I saw Sue from Kentucky sharing that she heard a lot of really similar things to the things that they're experiencing. What is resonating with you, maybe what surprised you. And so we'd just love to see those in the chat. I think a couple of things are really resonating with me, and I'm really lucky because I get to work with both Kayla and Donna on a pretty consistent basis. One is just how deeply they know their communities, that they, shared that they intentionally chose these districts because they knew they were representative of the wide swath of communities that exist in West Virginia. Second, I think the other thing that is just really sitting with me is how much is beyond just the school. That family engagement, when we talk about it, is about the school, but school is just so much more than just a nexus for education, that all of these other challenges, mental health, addiction, poverty, are all interrelated to the ways in which families and students can engage with school. So those are some of the things that are really resonating with me and just sitting with me, and that I think are really common across not just West Virginia, but many other contexts. I really appreciate Samantha's comment in the chat that, I think I'm really similar to Samantha in that I have worked predominantly in urban school context and am surprised to hear that there are so many challenges and needs that are really similar across these contexts. And I think coming out of the pandemic, we're seeing that increased need coming from our young people as well. Don't forget, I saw some things happening in the Q&A section, but remember, you can submit those the questions that you have in the Q&A, and we'll get to address as many of those as we can in the Q&A section. So at this point, I'm going to pass it back to our South Dakota partner, Morgan Von Hayden, and she will be sharing a little bit more about what they heard and are learning in South Dakota.
Thank you so much, Shoko. Thank you to Flamboyan, and it's so good and great to see so many folks joining us on our webinar today. I get very excited, you guys, when I get to talk about family engagement and just to share more about our family and communities across South Dakota. So once again, hi, I'm Morgan Von Hayden, and I am the project director of the South Dakota Statewide Family Engagement Center. Like West Virginia, we were one of 13 states that received federal funding to do family engagement statewide. When we received this funding 5 years ago, it was one of those moments where you have all these emotions, because we knew that family engagement was important. We had done some smaller grants across the state. We had former PERC, and our former PERC director is still a co-director with me, and that's been amazing. But then 5 years ago, when this opportunity came that we could do family engagement statewide, we put out our hopes and dreams, and it's been amazing. And then when we got to work with Flamboyan more and really ask some of these harder questions on, like, what is family engagement? What does it mean to you? And I'm going to talk more about that. But it was like, this is such an amazing opportunity to really get the voice of our underrepresented families across our state in our rural areas that we may not always get to hear from. Our mission through the statewide family engagement, the Family Engagement Center, is that we know that children do better when schools and families are connected. But what does that mean? Next slide, please. So we asked this question. We wanted to gather the feedback from groups focused on the family's experience of perceived barriers to engaging with their child's schools. But still, like, what does that mean? Like, there's a lot of jargon. So we truly broke it down to, what does family engagement mean to you? What could it look like from the school perspective? And we also asked that similar question, like, what do you wish your school's community knew about you? Those were our questions. And oh my goodness, you guys, the feedback that we got was incredible. Next slide, please. We wanted to look at more than one community. We are statewide. We are actually in every county in South Dakota. That's been our goal over the past 5 years. So super excited that this year we have finally been able to say we are in all of the counties across South Dakota. So we wanted a representation of, what does that mean? Well, we worked with our Todd County School District on the Rosebud Indian Reservation, And we were able to do focus groups with families and students. Oh my gosh. Okay, so students, if you did not know, are very truthful when it comes to sharing their thoughts and opinions about almost anything. And especially when it's done in that safe, appreciative inquiry manner. So we also did the appreciative inquiry when it came to all of our different focus groups. We also went to our Homeless Connect event in Rapid City. The Homeless Connect is an event that we host every year in our second largest city across the state. Now, when I say second largest, it's still only 60,000 people. And then from all of our rural communities, we see lots of folks coming up to this one-time event. It's a free event where there's community partners that are there. And we wanted to be truly strategic when we're getting that voice of folks to go to our families. We didn't always want them to come to us, so we went to them. So that's why we did go to Todd County. We went to the schools. We went to the Homeless Connect, and we set it up to do focus groups. We also had surveys that were going on, asking all these different questions. But we also didn't want to lose the voice of potential first-generation college students and what were their perspectives and how did they get to the university level talking about family engagement and what did it mean to them. When we're working with all these different folks, we actually sat down in focus groups with 146 different individuals. That, oh my gosh, was so amazing. During the Homeless Connect, we actually sat down with 102 families in one day. We had focus groups going on in every corner. We had a plan. Oh my goodness. The energy in that space was incredible. And then when we went to Todd County, we went to the university, also really great energy. I don't know, my heart, you guys, oh, the Homeless Connect was definitely one of those moments where we would love to duplicate it again because it was like just raw feedback and it was, oh my gosh, just so good. We also offered appropriate incentives. Like I said, we wanted to go to our folks, to our families, but also compensate their time for when they were able to fill out the surveys, take their time to just have that conversation with us. We, in a lot of our rural communities, we don't have big box stores, we don't have those different things. So we did some different stipends for folks when they would go through our focus groups and those conversations. We did offer food gift baskets as a prize. We did just different things that we were trying to hit some of those barriers and also have everyone get excited about being part of these conversations. Next slide, please. Like I had mentioned, we asked the questions like, what is family engagement? What are some of the barriers? What do you wish your schools or your teacher knew? And I think the biggest aha moment that we all came away from, our whole team had partnered with Flamboyan, and it was big. Like we all wanted to be part of this amazing opportunity to get the voice. And when we asked the question, what does family engagement mean to you? In our world, because I mean, we're the Family Engagement Center. We work with schools, we work with districts, we work with folks. When we say family engagement, if they're a Title I school, they usually know what we mean. But now that we're asking families on what is family engagement? And I would say that probably 80% of them gave us, 80% of the participants gave us a definition that had nothing to do with school. We heard from families when we asked them, what is family engagement? It was dinner around a table. It was showing up at the dinner table. It was showing up at a Christmas party. It was helping a family member when they were in need. None of it really came back to the school and what does family engagement. Now, part of that also is the way we worded the question, because we asked it just like that. We asked the question, what does family engagement mean to you? And that was the answer that we got. But from that was the energy that folks wanted to say, family engagement doesn't always mean my mom and my dad. Family engagement, one of the things that we saw was everyone who's around the dinner table. So what does that mean? It could be the grandmas, the grandpas, the aunties, the uncles, the friends, the people that show up. And that was another thing we kept on hearing, was that we hear it's the people who show up. May not always be the blood relation, but it's the folks who show up, the folks who show that they care. And I'm like, oh, this is so good. So good. We also learned when we did ask the question that was a little bit deeper on what are some of the barriers when it comes to that relationship with the school. And number one, in all the groups, either it be at the Homeless Connect, either it be at the high school with the families or the students, if it be with the university folks, the number one thing that we heard was that communication and relationships were the biggest thing. And folks felt when there wasn't that communication home, when there wasn't that communication across the building even, our families and our students felt that. And the other part that came out was about the relationships. When we were talking about the person who you wanted to have, the number one thing that you wanted to have folks know is like, it wasn't that one class that made a difference. It was the teacher who taught that class. I was like, oh, that's pretty powerful. Those students, they were pretty awesome. We also asked our students more questions on, like, when we talk about family engagement, we know that family engagement is very strong at the elementary level, and then it starts to taper off at the middle school, it starts to taper off at the high school. And we'd like to think it slowly tapers off. I now have an elementary student, a middle school student, and a high school student. And what we were hearing is that there's really no tapering. Your families are involved, and then they're not. And that's good and bad, because the students want to be self-reliant, but they still wanted that communication. They still wanted that relationship. They still wanted to have that sense of family to make sure, like, they wanted that sense of family to make sure that they could be successful. And then also, because we were working in some of our very high needs areas, and we heard this from different subgroups, they didn't know how to go to college. They still wanted to have, like, what we would think of maybe, like, as a mom, I'm going to help my kiddo figure out college. Sometimes our families didn't have those tools. So we started hearing that too. And I think I could probably talk for another hour on just like these little nuggets that we got from these groups. And it's like, but we want more. We wanted more information. And from all of this, and because this has been such a great partnership, we've continued a lot of these conversations, because our district that we were working with was like, this is good stuff. How can we do this in all of our schools? Well, let's keep partnering together. Let's keep working together. Let's keep having these conversations. And right now we're sending out our holiday cards, and we capture everyone's names. Through this one district, we just sent out 120 holiday cards to our families. And as we're just signing cards, I'm like, this is incredible, because a year and a half ago, we had one school. So it's that ripple effect. When you sit and you listen in a positive way, or we also do it in a good way, people want to share. But then we actually do something with this data. Next slide, please. So with this data, we share it back with our families. We shared it back to our community. We shared it in different ways. So when we did the Homeless Connect here in Rapid City, we actually had, oh my gosh, I think we had 27 different schools represented. So we have 16 within this community, but then, like I said, it was some of our rural community. And from all of that data that was coming in, it's like, we can't just keep it. So how do we share it out? Well, we share it out with all of our key partners, because that's what you're supposed to do. But we also shared it back with the families. We shared it with the schools. So one of the big things that we told the schools was, when you say family engagement, that might not mean anything to your families. It's just school jargon that we all have to say. So one of the items that we wanted to do moving forward was prioritize strategies that provide educators with tools and actions. Because of everything that we heard, we wanted to be able to share that back with the educators so they could help their students from cradle to career. We also work a lot with our higher education folks, helping like our career learning centers with folks getting their high school diplomas and GEDs. So we wanted to give these tools back to all of those educators in those different areas. We also wanted to continue to support transitions and strong communication. Now, when we say transitions, we're meaning a couple different things. We believe in helping with transitions with everything. So transition into school, transition into elementary to middle, middle to high school out. We also worked with families transitioning into our state. We have become a large refugee state. In one of our districts, we have over 240 different languages spoken right now, and has become a hub. We, in some of our rural areas, have also become large migrant and refugee populations. So how do we help folks transition into our state, into our school system that they may not know? And then also, if we're working with incarceration, because that was a big barrier that we heard also as when we talk about family engagement, because parents may be incarcerated, how do we help families transition back together? Now, as I'm sharing all this, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's a ton of stuff. It is a ton of stuff, but that's why we have community partners. That's why we're talking to groups like Flamboyan and like, what do you do in other states? How do you do this? We have talked to West Virginia on different projects, and it's just all these different moving parts that we want to make sure that we're successful. So like I said, when I talk about transitions, when I was putting the slide together, I was like, how do I put all this stuff onto one slide to share with you guys? So you got my one sentence. I'm like, let's explain it to you guys. And then that third bullet here is build resources, trainings, and supports. Many of the things I've talked about are not not surprising things that we learned. They're not new things that we learned, but maybe we don't have the right tools or resources, or once again, to find that right partner who has those right tools and resources. How can we make them fit from the knowledge that we've gained? And one thing that we also like to say in our team is, once you know better, do better. So now that we have this knowledge, we have the tools, how are we going to share this information out? One of the cool things that we are also going to be doing with Flamboyan, so West Virginia, I just loved hearing all that, and I knew about it, but I'm still excited about it, is that we're going to be doing a very similar family leadership program, but we're calling ours Courage to Lead. And it is working with families on really finding their voice when it comes to how do you become that leader? How do you become that advocate for your students? How do you work together as a school that all families are being represented? Thank you so much, you guys. I'm like seeing different things pop up on the bottom. I know we're going to answer those questions in the Q&A. And yeah, so once you know better, we do better. Oh, and I talk fast. I think I got through my time. Next slide, please. Once again, my name is Morgan Von Hayden, and I am just so excited to be part of the Flamboyan family. We talk about family a lot. Here's our different contact information, and thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you, Morgan. Similar to Kayla and Donna, I get to work with Morgan all the time, and I'm sure that you all can also sense her palpable enthusiasm through the screen. I think for me, there are actually a couple of things that are coming up that are similar across West Virginia and South Dakota. One is this deep desire for both families to be heard and also for the educators to hear from families. I think that's been really powerful, that there is this desire on both ends. So it's on us to support in bridging that gap. I think the other piece, as both Morgan was speaking, and I saw also in the chat, is that there has been this intentional move away from parent engagement or, talking to parents, because there are so many people involved in a young person's life, aunties, uncles, a mentor who may not be even a blood relative. So when we say family engagement, we're talking about engaging every adult who is in that young person's life in a really deep and meaningful way. So those are some of the things that are just really resonating with me. And similar to somebody earlier in the chat, those are some things that also came up for me when I was a teacher in DC and in Boston, that, when I was calling a student's family, I was talking to grandma, I was talking to auntie, I was talking to a big sister. And so those are definitely things that are really coming up for me. I'm loving that there's a couple of resources happening up in the chat, especially around our populations for whom English may not be their primary language. I know that Morgan is working with a large refugee and immigrant population as well, and so I really love the sharing of resources there. So, as we noted at the top of today's session, we're also going to be asking you all to engage. So, if we could go to the next slide. We would love for everyone to hop on and go to slido.com. You can do that on your phone, your computer, your tablet. You can scan that QR code. You can just go to the website. And when it asks you for a code, you're just gonna type in rural FE in all caps. And so would love for folks, you've now heard from both of our West Virginia and South Dakota colleagues, what's resonating with you? What's sitting with you? What are similarities that you're hearing to your own context? What are similar challenges? Maybe what surprised you? All these sorts of things. So we would love for folks, I see one participant typing, we would love for folks to just populate and really engage with us. Tell us, what is it that you're hearing that's resonating with you? As you heard some of commonalities across both of these and some of the context, I saw the Hudson Valley come up. I saw the Lake Champlain area come up. Yeah, wanting the sense of belonging. I think I love both of those two things. The importance of neutral locations and the sense of belonging are really interconnected. I think I really appreciated our West Virginia colleagues' intention in choosing for their second round of listening non-school based locations, because sometimes school doesn't feel like a safe place for families. Student voice. Yeah, student voice is really important because students are also part of that family. The use of different modalities to communicate with our families. I know that for some of our colleagues that you are working in communities where there is not consistent access to internet. So how do we ensure that our families are having that concrete communication? Do we need to go back to old school paper flyers in our kids' backpack? Whatever that may mean, really thinking about what do our families have consistent access to. Yeah, I'm loving these things in the chat. All right, so at this point, I'm actually going to invite all of my partners, Kayla, Donna, and Morgan, to come back on screen because we've got some questions from the audience. So looking at my notes here, I would love for whoever of you would love to respond here. Are there times that you have encountered resistance to family engagement at the school level? And what do you do about that? So anybody who's got a thought response to that, come unmute yourself.
Yeah, I can go first. The first thing that I think of as, I've spent as a teacher or just what I've encountered traveling around the state with the Family Engagement Center is this does occur. And, even our teachers that we're training with, they're like, what do you do with this? And I think and it sounds simple, but one of the things is just continuing to build trust. That's one thing that you can do to keep, because it seems daunting to break this cycle from, past experiences they have or to figure out why. I think it's trying something new. And another thing is to keep trying and to just maybe go back and build trust. My daughter had a soccer game the other day. Her preschool teacher asked if she could go. And so that's something that someone can do to break some walls down is just, I love that she wanted to be there and my daughter loved that. And so I've just found to just keep on trying, don't give up, and just think of different ways you can help build that trust first to get them to come back.
I would like to add, I love that. I remember when my middle son was playing baseball and his kindergarten teacher was like, well, when does he play? I want to come. And then their first grade teacher did that. And I'm like, that's amazing. I have worked with schools in some districts where like, okay, we know we know we have to do these family nights. So we're going to put it out there and and they promote it as math night or, literacy night. And then they don't understand why nobody comes, and then they don't want to do it again. And I hear all these different things. I'm like, okay. I go, but when do people show up? Like, let's talk about that. And they're like, oh, they come to the basketball games. Okay. They come to the holiday parties. Okay, this is great. They'll come to the carnival. Ooh, like that could be gold. Well, what if we did like a literacy carnival and we do that link to learning? Like, we'll use the jargon with our educators, but we're having our families get to play games. And then they're like, okay, well, maybe we could do that. Can you, like, but sometimes there's still that shell shock where they're like, but how do you do it? And the first time I encountered that, because for me, you guys, I like to plan a party. I like to have those events and it's fun. And for me, that's very common sense. But working with some of my educator friends, like, we don't know how to do that. Like, how do you do that? And so that was also good for me, that sometimes it was more the fear of the unknown, because they didn't know how to do it. They didn't know the benefits of building that relationship. So once we paused, we gave them some tips and tools, like, I will come help you. I'll come help you throw a carnival. It'll be fun. But we'll sit down and take that fear away. And then the next time they did it on their own. And the next time they did it on their own, and more families came. And now it becomes like this cool thing. And you're building that culture within your school, that climate piece. Now you get to have some of those tougher conversations if you need to with families.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Donna, as you were describing that soccer game, I was reflecting that one of my very first students that I had a really tough relationship with him. And one of my mentors said, go to one of his football games. Because he was a kid who loved football, didn't love reading. And I went, and I was really skeptical, but like, he didn't always want to talk to me in school, but he was thrilled that I was there at his football game. And I think that really broke down barriers. And then Morgan, as you were talking, I think this is a question we talk about at Flamboyan a lot, is how many of our educators have had that explicit training on how to build relationships with families? As a former teacher myself, I say, like, we got like an hour, 2-hour training, maybe one module, but how many of us get to do a deep dive into building that relationship and why that's important? That family engagement isn't a bucket onto itself, but it's really a through line that supports student attendance, academic achievement, all these sorts of things. So I really appreciate you naming that. Sometimes, similar to our students, we have to make the implicit explicit for our educators as well. So when you did your listening, I would love to hear from both teams. What were you most surprised by from the listening that you heard?
I'll go first. I think the biggest surprise, because when you've been in the family engagement world for a while, you start to hear some of the same themes like that when you're having these conversations. But the biggest surprise was when we asked the question, what does family engagement mean to you? Because I don't know if everybody does this, but I truly came in like, these are going to be the answers. We're going to kind of already theme it out. It's going to be great. And then when their answers didn't match anything that I had thought was going to come out, because their family engagement had nothing to do with school, because that was my lens. I think that was one of the coolest and craziest things, was that, all right, we need to reframe the question. We need, I think that was my biggest surprise, because all the things that were also said, though, could be tied back to school, because that was one of the things that we're talking about. Like, okay, well, they just said all these things that has nothing to do with what we really wanted them, like how we had to tie it. And I go, but it's gold, because that when they hear family engagement, that's what it means to them.
That's great, Morgan. Goodness, I feel like there were a lot of things that we could have predicted, and a lot of things that surprised us. One of the things, I don't know that it was shocking. Maybe it was surprising how often we heard this. I mentioned this briefly when we were talking, but communication is kind of the key consistent theme we hear about, right? We need to work on communication. And I think, Donna, you hit on it a little bit. I think we have to build that trust first, because there were multiple parents who expressed in one way or another that they want to be friends with educators. They want to be a friend in this. And I was surprised, not that I didn't think that families felt that way or caregivers felt that way, but I was surprised at how often we heard that and how often they viewed it in that way. Like they just want to be this common force that's moving forward in this. And I think all of these other pieces play into that so much, the communication, the trust. And when we can work on those things, I think that it just builds that relationship. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, that's what everyone wants. And that's what we were consistently hearing.
I think I don't know why I should be surprised, but I was surprised because we had data from educators that we had collected previously. I was still surprised how much they were not on the same page. We would visit some very small schools and some of the educators would paint a picture of a very close-knit community. Everybody knew everybody, no, all trust, no barriers, all this. And but then when we go in the community, we just wouldn't get the same perspective. And so I'm excited to do more stuff, with the data that we collected to try to get that voice out there that, your perspectives may not be on the same page.
Yeah, we talk a lot about moving from family involvement to family engagement, but it's hard to do that if we don't have a collective understanding and definition and vision for what family engagement looks like. And I hear that's what sort of all of you are sharing, that it is really different and that there's a lot of work that families are doing that is unseen by schools. And so how do we elevate that and celebrate that in the same sort of way? I appreciate that. This is a big one. I hope you all are ready. 5 years from now, what do you hope will be true about family engagement in your community?
This is a big question, and I feel like I could name numerous things. The thing that pops into my mind first is I feel like there's so much momentum in family engagement and everyone's starting to talk about it more. And I don't know what this looks like in every state, but in West Virginia, I hope that we are hearing family engagement as much as we're hearing literacy and numeracy. And those things are so important, but family engagement is at the core of that. And I think we can build on literacy, we can build on numeracy when we've really spent time and taken the effort to build on that family engagement piece. So I really hope that it is as commonly used of a term and has such a common understanding statewide and nationwide, and that people really understand and value the importance of family engagement and can really envision what family engagement looks like and how it looks in a positive way.
Yeah, I agree with Kayla on that. It would be, a lot of people think of literacy as in like we were in a movement to integrate literacy across all curriculum. Even when EdVenture gets together and we're designing future projects, we have learned so much. We want to integrate family engagement in every project idea. And I would love to see that it's not its own isolated, thing, that it's integrated in everything that we plan, that for that plan to be successful, you need some type of family engagement in that. And so that would be nice to see. I think it would also be nice to see every type of family's perspective known. And understood, and somehow, you have your two family working home parents who don't have time to be present. Well, how are they reached? You have your, single family homes, parents who are incarcerated, grandparents are raising kids, like how each one is being reached in a different way, because it's going to take various ways of family engagement to reach everyone. So maybe just, understanding that there are several types of different families and different ways you're going to have to be able to reach them. Actually, one tip, I interviewed a principal yesterday, and she said anything important, her newsletter, everything goes home on the back of the monthly menu. And she goes, that reaches a whole population that, my robo-text out might not have reached. So finding every avenue to reach every single different family, even if it's just the families that are just going to look at the menu and turn it over and see some information on it.
So many things. That was a big question, Shoko. Oh my goodness. I think in my in my dream world, okay, first of all, I have to say, Donna, I love that idea of putting the newsletter on the back of the menu, because we look at the menu and we circle it on the fridge. That's brilliant. I think in 5 years, I have like 4 different dreams, maybe 5, maybe 12. I don't know. We have a few different dreams. So one of them, though, is that family engagement becomes a common language for our families. So if they hear family engagement, then that really is, oh, I want to come to this school. That makes sense. Like, we want to do this. I would also love for districts to not think of it as a checkbox. That, like when Donna and Kayla both were talking about how it's woven throughout, I've worked with so many districts that are just like, we've done it. We have our compact, we have this, but it's like, how is it woven throughout? And just, it's part of everything that we're doing. And then my other part, and I think it's more of a selfish part, but I love that family engagement is truly has become more of a common language, especially over the past like 2-3 years. And we are being asked to join the table on a lot of different grants to different corporations, nonprofits, communities that saying, we want family voice. Will you join us so we can learn how to get family voice here? And I want that to continue. So we're part of Department of Health. We're part of Department of Labor. We're part of all like these different folks coming in. And that, you guys, has never happened before. And I would just love to see that to continue. And at some point they're like, okay, we're going to get we know how to get families on board. We don't need you, but I still want to be needed. So yeah, those are my dreams.
Thank you all. I know that was a big question, but I think that really leads us into what is the future of family engagement. And I think I want to elevate some things that you all said. One, family engagement isn't its own bucket of work. That when real family engagement is happening, it is elevating student learning, student successes. I'm going to steal Samantha's word there, integrated into all of the work that we are doing, because it is truly critical to student success, to the success of families, and also to the health of communities. I think that is really important. As we saw, school has become a nexus, especially in pandemic times, of so much more than just education. I know that so many of your school communities are also becoming food pantries, places where families can get access to medical support, to vision screenings, to dental screenings, mental health services, that because schools have really become a nexus for their communities, we have to bridge that gap, and we have to really ensure that families see school as a welcoming space, because their young people and them are getting more than just education in our buildings. So I think that is really, really integral. And I think, Morgan, I love that you are hearing from your colleagues in other realms that they want family voice. And we have to make sure that not only are they hearing, but then they're implementing, because we know the moment that we hear people, but we don't take them and take the things that they are asking for, wanting their suggestions, and being able to put them in place, that they stop talking. So I think it's really, really critical that we not only listen to our families, but we take what we're listening, what we're hearing, and we apply that learning. I think that is really, really critical. And yes, absolutely shout out to the community schools movement. We have partnered with a lot of community schools, both in the DC region, and I know that it is a large movement that's really sort of moving towards integrating so many of these things. So as you all can probably tell, we could stay on and talk about this for another half an hour, 3 hours, the rest of our days, but we are starting to reach the end of our conversation here. So I wanted to say thank you again to our partners, Morgan, Kayla, and Donna. And want to highlight a couple of other things that hopefully through this conversation, you are not only learning something in terms of what our colleagues in West Virginia and South Dakota learned, but also for yourself. What are things that you may be reflecting on, and how you're going to incorporate real family engagement practices, listening into your own community. So if I can get the slideshow up as we're closing out here, we have one quick thing to share. So as we think about improving our real family engagement practices, we do at Flamboyan want to share one resource that we have developed to support our colleagues and practitioners on the ground as they're doing this work. We'll talk about it, and hopefully we can get the screen share going in a moment. But we have the Family Engagement Assessment Tool. It is a free and accessible tool on our website. It is 29 questions, research-based questions that we've developed in partnership with professors and practitioners in the field. And it will, once you take the assessment, it will highlight for you your own areas of strength in terms of family engagement and potential. In addition to getting your areas of strength and growth, we also then will provide you with a related resource so that you can continue to expand your skill set in terms of real family engagement. We are really excited to be able to launch this tool. It is for everybody who touches family engagement to be able to reflect on their own practices. And then often the question for us is, well, so what? We'll provide you with a resource that may help you do some reflection, a tool that you can implement, and we're really, really excited about this opportunity. So we dropped it in the chat, but it is the Flamboyan Foundation, and it is on our website. The short website link is engageyourfams.org. And please visit our website. We would love to connect with all of you. We are on all of the social medias. We are on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, all these sorts of things. So please, please, please connect with us. We are so excited for you all to have joined us. And thank you again to my colleagues and partners in South Dakota and West Virginia for all that you've shared with today. And we hope that you took away something, learned something, and have gotten a chance to do some reflecting on your own family engagement practices. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we hope that you have a lovely rest of your afternoon.